I'm back. Mr. Clark's back. Let's take a look at topic 12.12, the rise of Austria, Prussia, and Russia. Sometimes we see Prussia and we don't really recognize where exactly Prussia is located. Prussia today would be in the center of modern-day Germany. It's kind of a region that we'll see in Germany. And I think we have a map down here. So when you look at the objectives for this particular section, we'll be taking a look at the causes of the 30 Years' War. We'll understand how Austria and Prussia emerged as great powers during this period of time in history. We'll take a look at the steps that Peter the Great, although some might say he was only very good, but Peter the Great took to modernize Russia. We'll describe how Russia grew under Peter the Great and later on Catherine the Great. Though they're both great, it's tough to tell which one was the best. Depends who you ask. I describe how European nations trying to maintain a balance of power. Okay, question 1. How had the Holy Roman Empire changed by the 17th century? By the 17th century, it was neither holy nor an empire, as it was deteriorating quite quickly. It had splintered or split into several hundred small separate states. Two, how was the Holy Roman Emperor chosen? How much power did the emperor have? He was chosen by 7 leading German princes called electors. Electors are people who are appointed to positions who then make decisions to vote or given counsel or guidance as to whom to vote for. For example, in the United States during a presidential election, you have the Electoral College. So each state gets what is called a slate of electors and who go to the Electoral College 6 weeks after Election Day, and then they officially cast the state's electoral votes for a particular candidate. The emperor was more a figurehead at this point in time than a true powerful leader. In reality, the German princes during this period of time had more power. How were the German states divided? What led to the 30 Years' War? Well, the southern German states were Catholic, the northern German states were Protestant. So once again, we're seeing a split within society because of religion. Religion splits. And as a result, we're going to see a definitive split between northern and southern Germany. The 30 Years' War was a series of conflicts started by the Catholic Habsburg King Ferdinand of Bohemia. You can see here, that would be in parts of what would be modern-day Czech Republic or Slovakia. And for one period of time, it was just Czechoslovakia, but then it split. It's in that general region there that you see with the arrow. They tried to suppress the Protestant and assert their powers over nobility. Four, what was the defenestration of Prague? May 1618, a few rebellious Protestant nobles tossed 2 royal officials out a castle window in Prague. This event sparked a wider war throughout Europe. The act of defenestration, or the act of dismissing someone from a position, often leading to them being tossed out a window. So kind of a weird term in history, but it does exist. If you do hear the word defenestration, it often deals with a lot of dissent, a lot of unhappiness, frustration, and you kind of take it out on others, either by removing them from power or basically removing them physically from the earth by tossing them out the window, and obviously they're going to die once tossed out the window. Five, how did mercenaries impact the 30 Years' War? The 30 Years' War dragged on. Brutal soldiers for hire, which are mercenaries, burned villages, destroyed crops, and killed without mercy, hence mercenaries. When you look at depopulation during this period of time, this means that people are dying at a rapid rate. Here's some reasons why people were dying and why the population was on a decline. Warfare, famine, disease. As much as 1/3 of the population of the German states may have died during the 30 Years' War through a wide variety of different factors. Second, what were the terms of the Peace of Westphalia? In 1648, exhausted combatants signed a series of treaties, which became known as the Peace of Westphalia. It provided for a general peace in Europe, settling several international problems. France was the clear winner, gaining territory along the German and Spanish borders. The Habsburgs were the big loser, as they lost most of their territories. The Netherlands and Switzerland became independent states. German states were then divided up into 360 independent states. All right, so as you look here at the Habsburg-Austria expansion, you can see the different regions there. You see the Austrian Habsburg land, the Spanish Habsburg lands. The Austrian Habsburgs are in kind of a purplish color. Spanish Habsburg in a greenish blue color. Prussia in a yellow. Swedish lands in a darker purple blue. And then the boundary of the Holy Roman Empire is kind of outlined for you. 8. What two German-speaking empires emerged after the 30 Years' War? Austria and Prussia. 9. What kind of conflicts could emerge in an empire as diverse as the Habsburgs Empire? Well, the Habsburgs had to deal with the challenges of difficult geography, different languages, histories, and culture. Basically, when you think about all the differences and the diversity here, it's very difficult to unite everyone together. How did the Habsburgs control such a diverse empire? They struggled to create a strong centralized government. They constantly were putting out what are meant to be brush fires in the empire, kind of nationalist uprisings or rebellions to try and get their own independence. They sent German-speaking officials to enforce laws, collect taxes for the empire. There was a problem, however, for the Habsburg Emperor, Charles VI. He lacked a male heir, and this is really a problem, especially during this period of time in history. He tried to persuade other European leaders to recognize his daughter's right after his passing. Unfortunately, most did not. So this period of time, depending upon what country or empire we're talking about, there was some difficulty getting people to accept a female leader. Here you see a little painted silk flag that shows a double-headed eagle, which was the symbol of the Habsburg dynasty. I'll explain the events of the War of Austrian Succession. After the death of Charles VI, there was a power struggle. Frederick II of Prussia made a play for power, while Maria Theresa attempted to hold on to her father's empire. Maria went to Hungary, requested support. The Hungarians embraced her, and she received additional support from Great Britain and Russia. With the support of the vast majority of the empire, Maria Theresa ascended to the throne. So she kind of defied what looked like a very difficult prospect of taking over for her father, and she was able to do so. Maria felt that she should reward the common citizens of her empire as a means of thanking them for their support. For the very first time, nobles, clergy had to pay taxes, lessening the burden placed on the poor. She strengthened royal authority by limiting the power of nobles and the church. Okay. Moving on to Prussia. Sometimes I pause for a moment just to give you time to catch your breath and make sure that you have enough time to get all the information down that you need. Okay, moving on to 14. How did Prussia increase its power after the Peace of Westphalia? The Prussian Hohenzollern ruling family united lands together and expanded their control, imposed royal rule on all subjects, limited the power of their nobility or junkers. Prussia created an efficient central bureaucracy and had a strong military. How did Frederick I gain the loyalty of Prussian nobility? Can you think of other methods an absolute ruler could have used to control the nobility? Which were most successful? Why? He gave them high-ranking positions in the military, in the government. Often leaders used fear and intimidation to keep subjects in line. Given privileges like control of land or not having to pay taxes were appealing to many members of the nobility. Let's take a look at a little quote interpretation here. Prussia is not a state which possesses an army, but an army which possesses a state. What does this say about Prussia's values? Kind of indicates that the power and strength of their army and the fact that the subjects are loyal out of fear, not out of love for Prussia. This shows that Prussia prioritizes power and strength over the feelings and needs of his subjects. 17. What actions did Frederick II take to strengthen Prussia? What was his nickname? Seized territory from Austria during the War of Austrian Succession. Built a brilliant army that made Prussia a true European power. And once again, not very creative during this period of time in history. His nickname, wait for it, make sure you're seated, take a deep breath, Frederick the Great. Yep, Frederick the Great. You would think at some point in time, these creative nicknames, they'd have some sort of word for great, something that is synonymous with great. Like Frederick the Fantastic, or magnificent, something different than just great. Right, if you look at this little print here, this shows the Prussian army camp in Pomerania. This is a territory that was between East Prussia and West Prussia. You can see how far back the tents go and how organized it kind of looks. Now moving from Prussia, and we're kind of getting in a hurry here. We're going to Russia. What dynastic family controlled Russia from 1613 to 1917 in over 300-year rule? This is the Romanov family, the Romanov dynasty. Russia was not modernizing, however, as a lot of its European counterparts were. It remained kind of a medieval society, kind of untouched by the Renaissance and isolated from the rest of Europe. Speaking of great, Peter the Great, extremely tall, nearly 7 feet tall. When you think about how tall 7 feet tall is today, you just imagine back then when the average height of a male during that period of time was probably like 5'5", 5'6". He had a huge laugh, a furious temper, curious about the outside world, and really a great personality in history. Peter the Great's motto was, "I am a student and I seek teachers." How do you think this motto relates to his practice of observing everyday people when he toured Western cities? Well, he was curious about everything in life. So what he did is he decided that he would go to the big cities throughout Europe, learn the different cultures. He visited several European cities to see how they live, what technologies were out there. And of course, that quote indicates his great desire to learn, an inward curiosity. 22, how did Peter the Great westernize Russia? Well, he had adopted Western styles of clothing, He allowed open socialization of men and women. He imported Western technology. He established new academies for learning, in particular in math, science, and engineering. He adopted mercantilism, built canals, and expanded the exports of Russia. So building canals would make it a lot easier to ship out goods, products, and eventually Russia would be able to sell some of their own products along the way too. Moving on to 23, what is one reason that Peter the Great greatly expanded the military during his reign? Well, you can kind of make some assumptions on that. He wanted to expand Russia's borders and empires, and in order to do so, he would need to go to war with his neighboring countries. When you look at the legacy of Peter the Great, created a large, strong army, expanded Russian territory, gained ports along the Baltic Sea. Next, we'll look at Catherine the Great. I'm going to see how Catherine the Great came to power. You're going to understand how power-hungry she was. Her husband in the leadership position in Russia is Tsar. Sometimes you see the Tsar spelled T-S-A-R. Sometimes, and I'll give the alternative here for you, the one I actually prefer more often than not, C-Z-A-R. So either one suffices, same thing. Peter III was assassinated, and some people speculated, and they never can prove it, that Catherine was somehow behind the assassination so she could ascend to the position of the emperor or Tsar of Russia. Catherine the Great continued some of Peter the Great's efforts to westernize Russia, but was also a ruthless leader like her predecessors. She reorganized the provisional government, codified laws, started state-sponsored education, granted the Russian nobility special privileges, exempting them from paying taxes, which is kind of an ongoing theme with some of the leadership in different countries around the world. And then any uprisings amongst the serfs, she immediately crushed any rebellions. Okay, we're going to use the map now for the next question. Based on the map of Russia, why were the ports on the Black Sea more appealing to Russia than those in Asia? Well, when you see the Black Sea there, it actually gives them an outlet to get to the Mediterranean Sea and trade throughout much of southern Europe and also out to the Atlantic. So this would give them a tremendous access to what would be the more wealthier regions of the world. Okay, moving on to 28. What 5 European powers dominated European affairs? Austria, Prussia, France, Great Britain, and Russia. Why do these nations want to maintain a balance of power? A balance of power means that everything is pretty much equal. You know, if one nation has too much power and the scale gets kind of tipped and the balance of power is out of whack, then obviously it's a situation that that powerful country could begin to dominate in a particular region. If everybody's about equal, you're going to be a little more cautious about invading a neighbor. So at this point in time, those Fab Five were about equal. 30. What were the two main rivalries during the 1700s? You had Great Britain versus France for European and colonial dominance, and Austria and Prussia for domination of the German states. And then finally, the lesson reflection. In the 16th and 17th centuries, alliances between nations were formed based on religion. By the 18th century, what were alliances based on? What does this say about trends within European politics? Well, things shifted based on military power, colonialism, geography, and many, many other factors beyond religion were very important to rulers. So we see a shift, just like we saw a shift away from the church during the Reformation, we're seeing more of a shift here away from the church during this period of time in history as well. Hopefully you enjoyed some of our discussions today on some of the absolute rulers and leaderships around the world. Until next time, Mr. Clark is